All right. Oh, it says we're live. So it says we're live. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Laura Brill, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Civic Center. And I'm so happy to be here today and in conversation with Elizabeth Clay-Roy, who I greatly admire and who is the CEO of a fantastic organization called Generation Citizen that works with young people in high school on civics education and empowerment and democracy in many states across the country. And we've been getting to know one another and just appreciating, I think, one another's work. As you're entering, I'll just give people a little minute to enter. And as you're entering, if you feel like it, feel moved to do it, let us know where you're from. And also, if you feel even more moved to it, let us know where you went to, what city and state you went to high school in. So maybe you'll reconnect with an old friend and tell us a little bit about, help us get to know you. So Elizabeth you're in New York right now. Is that right?
That's right.
You're heating up for a mayor's race and the summer.
Indeed. No, we actually have a very active and competitive local election, which is exciting, right? Coming after a presidential year, I actually think it's wonderful for youth participation to have then a really dynamic and active local election that brings people's opinions out, brings people's ideas out. So I hope that a lot of young people will be paying attention and getting ready to early vote or vote when the primary comes in a couple of weeks.
Well, that's great. And I just saw somebody came in who's from New York and went to school in Brooklyn. So maybe they will have an opportunity to see some of what your folks are doing in New York. And I was saying to you before we started, I live in Los Angeles. I'm here in Los Angeles right now. Our city has been in the news. I think people have seen. And so just want to say to people across the country, really, who are starting to come out and um, really in support of the right to peacefully protest and stand up for diverse communities. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for the people in LA who are doing that. Our law enforcement here in LA is perfectly adequate to monitor protests, which are overwhelmingly peaceful, and the calling out. I'm just going to say that it is upsetting to see the militarization of opposition to peaceful protest. So anyway, folks, thank you for that, and to everybody who said hello, and send good thoughts to people and especially immigrant communities in Los Angeles. Thank you for doing that. So let's dive in. Let me introduce you first to our wonderful Substack Live audience. I'll just say I've been doing these, started to host these, and it's a really nice way to connect with people and just have a conversation about topics of mutual interest, mostly, around youth and around democracy. And the thing that draws me to this work is really seeing the excitement of students who want to get involved and to have things demystified, like how can they make a difference, especially as they're coming of age, and then the really incredible need for resources, like the ones that Generation Citizen provides, and that we try to provide at the Civic Center, to fulfill the need and to help young people see a positive example of getting involved. So let me just tell you about Elizabeth, everybody. Elizabeth Clay-Roy is the CEO of Generation Citizen. It's a national, nonpartisan organization partnering with schools nationwide to offer youth the civic knowledge and skills they need to actively participate in democracy. Before she joined Generation Citizen, Elizabeth was the executive director at Take Root Justice, chief of staff at the Phipps neighborhoods, and deputy director of Opportunity Nation, where she worked to advance economic and educational opportunity and grassroots democracy. She began her career working in participatory planning in India and serving Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick as policy advisor and the director of grassroots governance. She's won all kinds of wonderful awards, and I'm just delighted to be speaking with her today. So, Elizabeth, can I call Liz? Elizabeth?
Liz
Like,
is great.
Liz. Okay. So, tell me, tell a little bit about, I gave some highlights of your background, but what's the kind of story behind what drew you to civics education work, democracy work, and where you are today?
Sure. Well, again, thanks so much for having me. This is really fun way to connect, Laura. So I was raised by educators who themselves were involved in their communities. And so I was a politics junkie as a kid. I went from Sesame Street to C-SPAN. I mean, I was that into really not just political outcomes, but actually like, how does this thing called democracy work? And I was really fascinated by it at every stage. Some of it came from my parents who had been, raised in North Carolina and had moved to Boston, where I grew up. And I remember when the Eyes on the Prize documentary came on PBS in the 1980s. We had the videos, it was on loop all the time in my house. And I think it was because my parents both as they had been young people during the civil rights movement. And it was really meaningful for them to have those videos be a part of my own civic education at home,
Hmm. Hmm.
but also to reinforce that the fight wasn't over. And so I really did grow up in a home where it was expected that one would be involved in community. It was just a matter of how, right? That's what you got to figure out. But there was no question about an expectation of service and participation. Um, and so initially, I didn't want to do kind of politics, and I was drawn to communities and to urban planning actually. And
Hmm.
when I got involved in urban planning, and I never did it because I thought like I had a grand plan, like a Robert Moses of like what a community should look like, but because it was a really cool way and there was a practice in community planning of fostering spaces where neighbors came together and set a vision for their
Hmm.
community. And I loved that. What I found as I started engaging in things like that was that most of the people who participated were older. And so I was in my early 20s. And so I was often looking at ways, okay, well, how do we get more young people involved? Like what games can we use? What technology can we use? What partnerships can we do with schools? And so I then went on to have a career that included lots of different organizations, but I was always looking for how do we bring more youth voice in? How do we bring the perspectives from across the generations? And so when I, about 5 years ago, learned about the work of Generation Citizen, was just incredibly excited by this organization that had been started by a college student, had grown to working with schools across the country. And it was such a delight and has been an incredible honor to be a Generation Citizen ever since.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I just sort of a couple of things that you said in there kind of spoke to me. One is just the eyes on the prize is kind of the media moment backdrop of awakening. I'm trying to think of what mine was. I'm not sure I know, but I do know Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. This was a very big deal of and different ways in which cultural moments shape you and cause you to see the world in a different way. And sounds like the influence of your parents was very, really, really present. And the other thing that I'll just point out is it sounds like you have a very multidisciplinary approach to your work of taking principles of, urban planning and then seeing how that relates to community organizing, to education, and to, empowering young people. So it's a really fantastic way in, and I'm you talk, I want people to learn about Generation Citizen because not some what I believe is so many of these of organizations that serve youth don't get the presence and the attention that they deserve in terms of how you are changing the dynamics of democracy and helping young people see a pathway in. And there's a lot of spotlight. I'm a lawyer by background, and a lot of spotlight goes to lawyers and the legal education or legal community, and they're like fighting the fight. And so because there's fighting, it gets a lot of attention. But the education and the cultivation of youth ability to participate isn't always doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves. So tell me about Generation Citizen and the work that you're doing to provide young people leadership and strengthen democracy.
Thanks for the question and that recognition. And while I'll talk about Generation Citizen, I'm so proud of the work we do. We really do. We can only have this impact in partnership with teachers who really don't get appreciated enough in our society. So,
100%. Totally.
what
I'm
we
going to press the little heart button there because heart button for teachers. Okay.
and so Generation Citizen, we've been around for 15 years, and our approach is as a nonprofit organization, we have created a curriculum, and with our curriculum, we partner with school districts around the country. When a school district partners with us, it's because they want their middle or high schoolers, right? We work with grades 6 through 12, want their middle or high schoolers to engage in project-based civic learning. And so with that partnership, we bring our curriculum and then we do professional development for social studies, civics, government, or U.S. history teachers who will teach it. And then we do ongoing coaching for those teachers for the semester they teach it to help them bring this experiential civics class to life. So our approach has given us a chance now to reach over 250,000 students nationwide. And that includes students everywhere from big cities like New York City, where I am, and we work with students, in all 5 boroughs, to small towns with population of 1,000 in places like Oklahoma, places like Kentucky. We're in small towns and big cities in California, small towns and big cities in Massachusetts. And the reason why I share this, the reason why the geography is important, is because at the heart of community-based civics, which is our approach, is the notion that young people are most animated about developing deep civic knowledge when they are at the same time being able to practice civic skills around issues that matter to them. So the way that the curriculum generally runs, I'll just give you the very short version. But students begin by not just with a textbook about what's going on in, with the 3 branches of government, um, but in fact by asking them what issues matter to you. And students are encouraged through a rigorous process to lift up the issues that matter to them. And we say, don't pluck from the headlines, but talk about what do you and your friends talk about, on the way to and from class? What do you and your friends text about? What is going on? And help them draw connections between the issues that matter to them and how local and state government work. The students then identify an issue that they want to take action on as a class and engage in root cause analysis, participatory action research, before really honing in on the action they want to take. So the focus of community-based civics is, yes, about helping them develop deep civic knowledge. So yes, they absolutely will rigorously understand the 3 branches of government, and not just at the federal level, but at the local and state level as well. But really understand how those work in relationship to their role as community members. So our students over the years have identified a range of issues that they've wanted to take action on. Increasing access to mental health supports in schools is a common issue. Addressing environmental issues, whether that's littering in the street or whether that's putting solar panels on roofs. They look at these range of issues, and once they have identified what they want to focus on, they say, okay, so who in government is best positioned to make this change in a deep and lasting way? The last thing I'll say is, we really see a strong connection between the work of engaging young people to recognize their long-term power as community members, right? To say they're not citizens waiting to turn 18 when they can vote, though voting is such a powerful tool, which I know we'll talk about, but to recognize their power as community members now, as a 6th grader, as a 7th grader, as an 8th grader, as they become experts on their issues, and they become deep experts on issues of mental health or substance use or any manner of issues that they take on. They are able to bring that expertise into relationship with government officials now. And they see, and what we love is when we see elected officials come to our Civics Day, which is the kind of culminating event of the Generation Citizen curriculum. It's kind of like a science fair for democracy. And students are all sharing their issues, and elected officials come around and talk to them. It often starts with elected officials will come in and say, "Oh, what a nice idea. Oh, this is going to be cute." And they realize after having their first experience with a group of students, like, oh, these young people really know their stuff. And they are relating to them appropriately with the respect that they would give any other constituent. So we're really helping young people through a semester-long curriculum, middle or high school, unlock their civic agency, their civic power, and their sense of belonging, while helping them develop really strong civic skills, civic knowledge, and disposition.
Well, that's fabulous, first of all. And there's so many points that you hit on that I would want to explore more. And one anecdote, just since you mentioned the public officials coming to see this, it must be very eye-opening when let's just take mental health, which is something that affects so many young people and is completely nonpartisan or and should be right and does not get the attention that it deserves and that young people place on it because they see their friends having mental health challenges, or they themselves are having mental health challenges. And so it must be quite illuminating when, the mayor or city council person shows up to the cute presentation to get kind of buttonholed, right? By like, what are you going to do about it? Or the school board member, like, can we actually have more mental health counselors? And understanding that the students understand the choices that have gone into the situations that they're facing. The other question I want to give you a chance to expand on for people who don't know these terms, but you used a couple of terms that may be unfamiliar to people: experiential civics or project-based civics and community-based civics. Can you just give a kind of 101 for what those things are and kind of how they're different from just like there's a legislative branch and there's an executive branch and yeah.
Absolutely. And I often make an analogy to the sciences because we have long recognized as a society that we will not raise the next generation of scientists and nurses and doctors only by having students read a great science textbook like 3 or 4 times, right? The textbook has core knowledge, but the way in which you develop skills around scientific inquiry, and the way in which we understand evidence and understand the way that we can discover new things is by having young people step foot into a science lab, right? And actually marry what's in their head to what's in their hands and have them see and practice with the subject matter that they're learning about. So community-based civics or project-based civics or other similar terms relate to young people not only reviewing a civics or government or history textbook where they can understand the facts of how government works, but actually to take on a real issue in their community, and by using that issue to do the research that a elected official might do or that an advocacy group might do, to have them practice a set of communication skills, both written and oral, to have them engage with consensus building skills, right? That is such an important part of our approach because democracy is not an individual sport, it's a team sport. So, one of the civic skills we're really cultivating is how they work together and then how they're going to work together with different elected or administrative bodies to move forward on the issues that they care about. So the project-based component speaks to taking on, not just focusing on um, answering a multiple choice test or completing an essay, but actually completing a project or a capstone project of some kind where students are expected to demonstrate results based on the work that they've done, typically over the course of a semester. And so for us, we're taking what is known, and project-based learning is a strong evidence-based practice used in every discipline used most rigorously and consistently in STEM, but it is just as applicable to us in the social study spaces. And the focus really is having young people take on a real world issue in their community. And the last thing I'll say is um, whatever subject matter we're talking about, the power of project based learning has long been known. It is more important than ever in the age of AI because we are talking about students engaging in real world work and the practice of communicating about that work, engaging and developing critical thinking skills that can't be automated by your favorite large language model. And so we are absolutely seeing a lot of schools and educators who are really looking for more and more project-based learning, student-centered learning opportunities that ensure that young people are developing those critical thinking skills that we know are so fundamental.
Right. No, that's fantastic. I just want to put this in, just translate a little bit also to the work that we do. It's like your work is the students do very issue oriented, go deep onto an issue they want to solve. We think about also running a voter registration drive as one of like a really wonderful experiential project based learning activities where it can start with, just like you're saying, like, what are the issues that you care about? Because a student running a voter registration drive, one of the things that they might not express, but that they might be feeling that's holding them back is, what do I, it's like a FOMO kind of thing, or not, or just a fear of like, what do I say if somebody comes up to me and says voting, like, why are you doing this? Why are you running a voter registration drive? Why do you care? And so the practice, like you're saying, of, well, this is why I care. I care because um, of mental health issues or quality related issues or environmental issues, whatever it is, and so they know why they are doing it, and the practice of publicizing something, planning ahead, setting a goal, recruiting others, getting permissions, and doing all these things for somebody at the high school level is it's a big project for actually anybody to
Yeah.
plan ahead, set a goal, and do all those things. But when you see students doing it and having great teachers be their back and guide them through the steps and provide the scaffolding. I mean, this is kind of, and then the pride that students have that really goes, so far in terms of like, that felt good, except, everything on online politics is so horrible, feels so awful. And it's like, no, this could actually feel good. It could feel good to have a conversation with somebody you don't agree with at the beginning and you're actually listening to what they think, and maybe you see something in a new way, or they do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the sense of agency that young people can develop as a part of project-based learning is so phenomenal, so important, and connected, to the conversation around social emotional development, frankly, for teenagers at this time, right? And we think of ourselves as leveraging one of the best things about adolescents, which is that they are very peer oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And so our approach is really not trying to kind of shame that about teenagers, but
Right.
actually let's celebrate their peer orientation. That's
Mm.
empathy. That's about, and so what we see is often, students will start the semester and throw 20 different ideas on, the whiteboard around the different topics that they will choose. And then often one or two students might share a deeply powerful personal story about why this issue matters to them. And the rest of the class gets it. They suddenly say, yes, we're picking the issue that student said because
Mm.
we didn't understand before how much that meant to some of our classmates, and now we do. And what a powerful entry point to civic life that is empathy. And then building on that to actually have the tools to make positive change, which then makes them even more excited when they get to vote because they recognize that the opportunity to register to vote, to get others involved with voting is yet another powerful tool to make positive change.
Yeah, no, that's great. The one here's a skill that I would love for your students to take on. So one of my dreams is that students will get in the habit of calling their representatives when a bill is coming up and they have a point of view on the bill, and that even if they're not yet 18, that they'll be able to say, I'm not 18, but I'm 16. I'm pre-registered to vote, or I know when I can pre-register. And you're going to be up for election in 2026, and by that time, I actually will be 18. So I have as much power in making this call to you as an 18-year-old, because what you care about is election in 2026. And
Great
so,
point.
it takes a little thinking down the line, but I'm that's my vision is people 16-year-olds will be calling their representatives with their friends after school, and having a great impact. I would love to hear what tell me about something exciting that, like, this year you talked about civics days. I don't know if that's like but something I think people are really looking right now for inspiration, for something to hold on to, for hope. And so often students are that hope and inspiration. So is there something this year that happened in Generation Citizens world that really might be meaningful for people to hear?
Sure, sure. Well, so those Civics Days events, which we hold in partnership with school districts around the country, are absolutely an infusion of hope. I feel so privileged to be able to go to those, and just in the last few weeks have been to Civics Days in Philadelphia and Long Beach and Boston, and we'll be having New York City Civics Day coming up in a couple of days. And these are places where dozens or even hundreds of students are coming and sharing the work that they've done over the last semester. And we also have other, we'll have elected officials and other community leaders come in and engage with them. And those are powerful not only because students get to demonstrate all of these great communication skills they develop and show off their research skills, but because of what I shared earlier about how elected officials often react, it really is powerful for the adults too, for us to recognize that young people are partners in this work of strengthening communities. And so that's another thing that I just love about Civics Days. But a couple of other things I'll share. We have students around the country who are engaging in projects, and we want them each to be deeply engaged in the process and not feel only focused on the result. But they do have results, right? We had students in Lawrence, Massachusetts, who transformed a conversation about littering in the classroom. And the mayor was so moved by their research, by their advocacy, and by their thoughtful engagement of the business community, which was really fantastic. The mayor signed their proposed ordinance into law at the school. He came to the school to sign it as a law. And it was offering tax credits to small businesses to maintain outdoor trash bins. I share that because it's not one that I think people would necessarily think about, that students were identifying as a major issue, or that they would have the sophistication to engage a diverse group of stakeholders to figure out, okay, what the solution here can be tax credits. But they do. And we see those kinds of community level solutions happening all the time. One other thing I'll say, because I know we had someone on from Brooklyn, there's been a phenomenal group of students now for a couple of years at the Urban Assembly Institute of Math and Science for young women in Brooklyn. And they have been focused on relationships between students and local police. And this has been an area where, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement in uprising in 2020, these students who were, children when that began, but socialized their own experiences with police with a sense of agency and thinking, what can they do about it? And they engaged with NYPD and with local elected officials and have created something called the Bridging the Gap, both event and programming that increases the power of youth voice as it pertains to police community relations, but also brings NYPD into um, an opportunity to be in a relationship with dignity with young people through a series of events on the campus. So we're just seeing tremendous things like that that give me a lot of hope, even at a time when there are many challenges that we see.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And one thing that I love about what you just described is the the duration, right? This is a long-term process, right? And so it's something that the students can see live on in the life of the community, and they can recognize, oh, this started a few years ago, and here's where they were then, and here's our piece of the work, and this will, and what can we do to then pass it along so that the relationships with police continue to improve, and the police continue to improve in their relationships to the kids, and so that's so. And I do think sometimes one of the things that we see is how do you instill in young people. There can be a lot of frustration and like, well, we voted. Why didn't everything change? Or like, there was a short term. There's so much short term thinking, and so much, just in the world. I mean, this isn't just for students, but and sort of how to help students have a meaningful piece of a project and see, oh, actually, this might take, whoops, something just help. This might take a long time for it to happen, but I know what my participation means. Uh,
Yeah, we have as one of our core values systemic impact with a strong focus on how can the students really, after they do their root cause analysis, think about, okay, what intervention, what action, what event could or activity could really change this issue for the better, for the long term, and for them to cultivate a sense of both balancing patience and urgency in their actions so that when they see the progress on their goals, they are confident that that progress will be durable, even if it doesn't happen immediately. And I'll say many of our students, while our curriculum is a semester long, many students stay
mm.
engaged with this issue long beyond their time in a Generation Citizen class, and some have, after they finish GC and gone off to college, have come back and run for office on issues that they became animated about through their civics class. So absolutely see the potential for that long-term commitment and engagement around community issues.
Yeah, so maybe I want a big sign: patience and urgency, right? We all need to which side, or where are we right now? Are we on the patient side or the? We knew all that, we'd have half the problem solved, right? Let me just say, to take a quick break, I'm Laura Brill. For those who've joined in after our introductions, I'm the founder and CEO of the Civics Center, and with me is the wonderful Elizabeth Clay Roy, who is the CEO of Generation Citizen, working to transform the world of civics education for middle and high school students in many parts of the country. If you all have a question that's come up that you're interested in having us answer at the end, please go ahead and write it in the chat, and we'll try and keep track of it as we go along, and come back and open it up or try to get some comments in. You Generation Citizen is involved in policy work at the state level, as well as all of the wonderful educational programming that you described. Can you describe just some of that policy effort and some of the variations you're seeing in different states about improving civics education legislation?
Absolutely. So, my home state is Massachusetts, and I'm incredibly proud to be from the Commonwealth, where there has been a deep commitment to high quality civics education for many years. So, we worked as a part of the MACLC, so the Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition, to encourage the passage of a bill now about 7 years ago that mandates an experiential civics kind of capstone project as a part of civics education in the state. And so we were so proud just this year to partner with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to put on these civic showcases across the state, because now every Massachusetts student, before they graduate, will have the opportunity for an experiential civics education. And so Massachusetts is really a leader in the country in that, but many other states are actively catching up and doing phenomenal work in their own way. And while I have a dream that like every student will have the opportunity, every student in the country should have an opportunity for hands-on civic learning, we know that it might not look that the same in every community. But Rhode Island, New Jersey, Utah, Illinois all have really robust, engaged civics expectations for their graduates. we've seen a number of states and have been involved with some of the advocacy or support for some of our larger states, which tend to go for a civic seal approach. So New York and California, for example, have something called like a seal of civic readiness, which is a seal that can be affixed to a student's diploma because their high school diploma to recognize that they participated in a rigorous civics education. That's powerful and beneficial. It helps create an opportunity for the higher education community to recognize that these are the kind of skills that they want to see in their incoming students. And it helps schools and incentivizes school districts, particularly those that are really looking to have a really comprehensive real world education for their students, to see this as a pathway to demonstrate that. Um, there are a number of states where, because of our kind of hyper-polarized environment around education in recent years, there have been states that have moved in the other direction, that have in fact limited or even censored the kind of civics education that is available to students. And so sometimes our advocacy work includes collaborating with coalitions and community members in those states, so that they can maintain access to civics and history education, and ensure that that is available to all students. And so I think what I would say right now are two things. One, America's 250th is coming up. There's a lot of excitement about 2026 and the 250th since the Declaration of Independence. That presents an opportunity, like the bicentennial did, um, to see a commitment and we hope an investment, not just in celebration and fireworks, but in fact, a commitment to what it means to maintain a democracy. And that must include civics education. So we're excited about being a part of both civic learning coalitions, but also kind of 250th commemoration groups, to talk about how civic education and a generational investment in it can be a part of the 250th. The other thing I would say that we all have to keep an eye out for is that while every state won't necessarily have this exact same approach to civics education, and they don't need to, it can be really dangerous, I think, as a country if we see a real bifurcation between the opportunity for rich civics and history learning in some states and not in others. And so while we can each, I live in New York, I'm very invested in the civics education in this state, but I care about the civics education that other students are receiving as well, because fellow Americans will work together to strengthen our democracy across state lines. And so, but for us, being a part of the state level coalitions are the best way to ensure that it's grounded in community values, and as well as the pathways to making positive policy change around civics education.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you also sound optimistic, yeah, including in states where it may be really challenging and that are, genuinely moving in the, not advancing, but actually trying to strip away all kinds of supports for civic participation, democracy, and youth participation. And maybe this is a good segue. I brought some graphics, which I have my little. I don't have a whiteboard exactly, but I have a little screen. And since Substack doesn't let you um, share your screen, I just printed out some graphics. So I wanted people to see, this is because we do a lot of data work. And this is a chart we made that at the Civic Center that is focusing on the disparity in voter registration rates between 18-year-olds and voters 45 and above. And so the red line is voter registration rates for 18-year-olds, and it's got these peaks and valleys, and it's incredibly steep because the peaks are presidential years, the valleys are midterms. If we did this chart to show, if we had data that showed where things were even before the midterms, the peaks and valleys would be much greater, even because they go up again at the midterms. And what you can see from this is the wild disparity between voter registration rates, which means the opportunity to vote and participate in elections for 18-year-olds and versus 45 and above. And also, especially in midterms, I mean, we're heading into a midterm in 2026, especially in midterms, the overwhelming disenfranchisement of 18-year-old voters with so far this century, every midterm election, fewer than 35% of 18-year-olds have been registered to vote. And so when people look at what that means is, 2 to 3 million missing 18-year-olds in every election. And so when people look at these numbers, numbers come out about low youth turnout. Those are often numbers, I just repeat this all the time, but those are numbers that are looking at turnout among all youth citizens, and it could be 18 to 24. But when you look at turnout among people who are registered, it's high. It's almost as high as older voters, and it's the lack of registration and lack of also the work that you're doing, Elizabeth, which is like providing the motivation to register in the first place because you understand why it matters and and what it means. So it's not just a mechanical. I mean, there is a mechanical element. You can make it so hard that it's with some of these the SAVE Act, as some people may know of, and state versions of the SAVE Act, right? You can make the administration so hard that it's almost impossible to overcome, or you can just drip by drip not help people be educated to see why it matters. And that's and I'm going to show one more chart, and then I'm going to ask you a question, and then we're going to open it up for comments. So this is a chart. I hope people can see it because the lines are a little bit skinny, but this is research we just did about New York, and we did week by week the numbers of 18-year-olds who became registered versus the numbers of 18-year-olds, number of people who turned 18 in that week. So the red line is number of people who turn 18 each week in New York, and the blue line is weekly registrations. And so you can see almost every week, except in, like the deadline for the midterms or the deadline for the general election, almost every week, young people are not registering to vote. They're registering at half of, or less of their potential. And I think this is, so that's to spotlight the importance of this. You're starting in middle school, and you're saying middle school, you can start to awaken to what it means to participate, and not just that voting is the only way to participate. There's many different ways. To try to cure this and help provide the motivation and the structure that will help us strengthen our democracy. And I think the last question I want to ask you before Q&A is, what are your thoughts on how we bring more civic education into voter registration efforts, and likewise how we bring more of the get more people registered through civics education?
So, I mean, the work you all do is so phenomenal, and I do believe that when young people are registering each other, right, a peer-to-peer approach is a powerful and important component. Um, we obviously have a crisis of trust in America. It has been taking place now for 65 years. It's been getting 75 years. It's been getting worse. And what's gone on over the last year is, even if the data isn't released, is unlikely to have made things better. Young people, Generation Z in particular, is the least trusting of any institution, of government, but also of other community institutions. But where their trust is higher often is school, their teachers, and their peers and friends. And so I do think high schools are an appropriate place for voter registration to be an active part, because the role of schools, of course, is to prepare citizens. From the founding era, we heard that from the vision from Thomas Jefferson, and why he was not only interested in founding colleges, but had a vision for engaging engagement of students who are younger than that in preparation for active citizenship. And we've seen that at every kind of refounding of our country through the civil rights movement, the deep recognition of the relationship between education and democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So schools are the right place for registration to take place and be available. What we see from young people who we work with and what we read is that this generation is very issue motivated, not partisan motivated. And that lack of trust often extends to political parties. And why wouldn't it? If your experience of a party is even before you are asked for your vote, you are asked for money on your cell phone every 5 minutes, right? And so reckoning with a generation that is intimately connected with the transactional nature of partisan politics means that the relationship of organizing and issue orientation and deep relationship around solving problems, I believe, needs to come before they are then asked to engage in electoral politics. And so I think that's why engaging in middle school and early high school is so important with a deep and community-focused approach to civics so that they are themselves, we hope, right, seeking out those opportunities to register to vote and use that tool because they know and are motivated that that will solve an issue that matters to them. But sadly, our political landscape is not inviting, and understandably so. And so we really want to build on relationships of trust that young people have with each other and have with school stakeholders. And the last thing I'll say is that is not partisan, right? As you and I know, but sometimes gets misconstrued. Civic life need not be partisan. And so I think it's important that in all of this complexity that we're navigating, that we maintain a focus on the power of nonpartisan civic life to invite young people to be involved in problem solving. And that's what democracy should be all about. It's us solving problems with each other and not painting that with a partisan brush.
Yeah, well, that's terrific, and so much to think about in all of this, and one thing that I just want to spotlight that you mentioned a couple of times in there was this issue of trusted messengers and trust in general, and cultivating trust and community. And there's so much spotlight right now on like influencers, which are great. Influencers are great. They're trusted if they're, if they're not spewing total hate. They're, it's great. We want more people who are of influence, um, and there can be trusted messengers and friends, parents, educators. The people who you actually know are also trusted messengers. Your grandparents are trusted messengers. You're in relation with them, and I think so many times people underestimate the impact they can have on the people right in front of them, on their neighbors, on being in relationship with their kids and their grandchildren on some of these issues and inquiring about what matters to them. And I think especially in times that are so polarizing, it's really important to think, influencers are not going to, influencers are going to be helpful in saving democracy, but influencers ultimately are not going to be what saves democracy. What's going to save democracy is people, like you're saying, working in community, solving problems with each other, having trust, realizing that they can disagree and come out at the end with something that they might not love, but that might be okay, and that maybe they'll get to try again, and building up these kinds of resiliencies and skills and experiences that create trust. And so I just really want to thank you, Liz, for the work that you're doing with Generation Citizen, to your whole team, who, by the way, I've got to know some, not just you, but other members of your team. And it's a really wonderful organization and a great team that you have built and are leading. And I don't think anybody asked any questions. If you do have questions, feel free to ask them now. But Liz, do you have any closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
I'm so grateful for the chance to chat, the chance to talk about this topic. And so I think I would say I'm not sure what the age variation of those who are watching this are, but if I'm going to assume that most of the people who are watching are adults in communities, I would invite you to think about the leadership tables you sit at, whether that's you're on a board in your local organization, you're in a school board or a school leadership role, or even kind of thinking about you're in a company. Think about whether or not there is age diversity at the decision-making tables that you're at. And if there isn't, what can you do to bring in the perspectives of young people who are engaged in your community and ensure that their voice is at the table? That's not about doing young people a favor. That is actually about producing better community outcomes by including the perspectives of everyone in the community. So that's what I would leave people with. Would also encourage folks to check us out. Generation Citizens, fairly new to Substack. So if you're finding us here, please check us out on Instagram or check out our website at generationscitizen.org.
Great. And we'll do a note tomorrow with some clips and some links for everybody. And feel free to, do definitely follow Generation Citizen and check out their work. Follow us, check out our work, tell your friends about both of us. And thank you everybody for joining. Liz, it's been really fun. Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
for joining today. Okay. Take care. Bye everybody. Bye.